Hi, I'm Mrs. Wright, and I have Coach Haig here with me, and we are going to give you an intro to World War II. So, as you watch this video, you'll have questions to answer, and feel free to pause the video. You can stop and go back to watch a previous section as you need to, but we just want to be sure that you understand the material and you're ready to dive into the Second World War. Okay, so just covering just a few of the overall details.
Mhm.
The Second World War was from 1939 to 1945, and there were many causes of it, and we can probably categorize them into three different sections. I always like to tell my students that World War II started because of how World War I ended.
Right. One of the things that you need to keep in mind is that World War I officially ended with the ceasefire, I guess, in 1918, but the Treaty of Versailles wasn't signed until a few months later in January of 1919. And really, there's only 20 years between World War I and World War II. So the period of time, I mean, it's 20 years, sounds like a long time, but in world years, 20 years is not very long.
It's not very long. You had a lot of people that were still alive that remembered World
Right,
War I
right.
that maybe they didn't fight in World War II,
Right.
but it was still kind of fresh on their memories. We'll also talk about appeasement and then the rise of dictators that occurred following the end of the First World War.
One of the things about the Treaty of Versailles that the kids need to know, and that most people teach, is that it punished Germany harshly. And one of the things that it did to Germany is it shrunk the size of Germany. Germany was a fairly large empire during World War I and before, and to punish Germany, it shrunk Germany. It didn't allow Germany to have a military that was large enough to attack anybody. They allowed them to have a military, but only as large as it would take to defend themselves, but not to go out and attack. And another thing that I just always used to tell my students is that the Treaty of Versailles took place in France with a representative from the United States, Italy, France, and Great Britain, but Germany wasn't there. Germany was not there to defend themselves. And another thing, probably maybe one of the greatest things, or one of the things that you read and hear about in the history books, is these four countries, especially three of them, the three other than the United States, wanted to really punish Germany by making them pay for the war damages. And it was in the billions of dollars. They did end up repaying it all.
Yes.
And it wasn't repaid until just a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But they paid this money back. And one of the things that happened is when they shrunk Germany, they took away some of the places in Germany that could be used to generate money and generate their economics.
So a lot of their resources.
Yes, it took away coal fields and oil fields and things like that. And then it turned around and punished Germany by making them pay money to a bunch of different countries. I mean, the list was quite lengthy. Any place that Germany attacked, and it was quite a list.
One thing I think with the Treaty of Versailles that to me might have been very difficult for the Germans is they had to accept the blame for the war.
Right.
And they're a very proud country. And I think anytime you have even just a regular argument or fight with anybody, there's kind of two sides to the story. Everybody maybe shares the blame, but for Germany to have to take the full blame, I think that probably had some wounds that were hard to heal.
And Germany was just, they just happened to be allied with Austria-Hungary, but Austria-Hungary had a great deal of responsibility for the war, and Germany just kind of got pulled into
the mix.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So as we go on in this map right here, if you will look, you can see where Germany lost the lands out on the edges. And like Coach Haig mentioned, a lot of that land held those natural resources. So that's where a lot of their country's money came from. So that was kind of a blow to the blow
Right.
for them. Okay, so the League of Nations.
Well, the League of Nations was a great idea, and it was basically the idea of Woodrow Wilson, who I used to tell the kids that he was kind of an idealist, and an idealist is a person that kind of tries to live in a perfect world, and his 14 points were very well thought out. But if you would read the 14 points, the world's just not going to be that way. It's just not going to turn out that way. And his 14th point, number 14, was the creation of the League of Nations, which basically was an organization that countries belong to, that if you had a problem with another country, you could take the problem to this organization, and they would help you solve the problem without attacking another country, without a war.
And so a peaceful solution.
A peaceful solution. And the ironic thing about it, as the students probably already know, is the United States didn't join it because we had just finished, World War I. The League of Nations was created, and we had a lot of senators and people in the United States that felt that if we joined the League of Nations, all that would do would draw us or bring us into possibly another war. And war is terrible, war is dreadful, and you don't want your young men to go off to a war in a country that maybe you've never even heard of and possibly not even come home. So the United States voted against joining the League of Nations, and we probably were without a doubt, we were the strongest country in the world at the end of World War I, but we didn't accept the responsibility of the leadership of the League of Nations. So, we're just creating problems. A lot of people say that one of the reasons why World War II started is because we didn't join the League of Nations. So, there's another kind of a underlying cause of World War II.
And then probably the third one is at the end of World War I, we go into a global depression, not just the United States in the Great Depression when the stock market crashed, but countries all over Europe, all over the world had been in a depression directly following World War I. I mean, we were just fortunate that World War I didn't hit our land, our shores, so we didn't have the destruction of that first world war to contend with. So I think we were able to hold off a little bit on the Great Depression and not feel those effects until the stock market crash.
Right. War is essentially always good for the economy. It's not good for the society, but you have war production during a war that you don't have during peacetime. You're making ships, you're producing tanks, you're producing ammunition and uniforms and boots and things like that you wouldn't normally produce during peacetime. So usually after a war, there's always going to be an economic decline, and the European countries were producing a lot more than we were, but we were producing quite a bit because we went from a very small peacetime army to over 3 or 4 million men in an army preparing to go overseas and fight. So we had to produce a lot, but we didn't suffer as much as the European countries did. But there was this post-war depression, which kind of led to an opportunity for some people to take over a country and to unite the people like Hitler did and like Mussolini did and like Stalin did and things like that.
Right. When you're in an economic depression, when people are hungry and they don't have food, they don't have jobs, you obviously think, oh, I need to change leaders.
Right.
We need to
Right.
have some change. And so sometimes that's an opportunity for people such as Mussolini and Hitler to come to power at a time when maybe under a better economy, better circumstances, they wouldn't have. But I mean, it's a depression. People need
Right.
they need to have some hope that somebody has the answers. And so even
The economy sometimes will determine an election.
Mhm.
If the economy is good, the guy that's running the country is probably going to get another chance to run it again. Unless he's in the United States, he's only going to get 2 chances, but then his party will get a chance to run it again. If the economy is bad, people need jobs, people are out of work, they're going to switch people or switch parties.
Yeah, you see that shift in
yeah.
power. Okay, so just to recap, there were a few things there. There was the Treaty of Versailles, so how World War, like the terms and conditions at the end of World War I, where Germany had to accept the blame and they had to pay reparations, money for the damages done during war. They had to give up land and they had to decrease their military, which was hard. We also had the League of Nations, which wasn't such a successful thing. A great idea to keep the peace, but there wasn't any structure in place to really monitor and maintain that type of organization. Right. And then the Great Depression happened globally, worldwide, so everybody was feeling the effects